Welcome, everybody. I am super excited to be having this conversation with Henry today. If you don't know Henry, and you're the one person who, there's one of you out there I know, let me do, Billy just gave some intro, but look, Henry has built and scaled one of the most, I would say, impactful and influential companies in the entire sales and marketing space. I think they've disrupted over and over what companies are doing. They're helping lead the industry on what we should be doing next. So I'm super honored, super grateful to have Henry on the call. He's the CEO and founder of Zoom. He's done it for I think it's almost 1,000 years. He's been running. It's like he built it from scratch. They're at significant scale. They've got thousands and thousands of customers, and Henry will give us more insight into what's happening in the revenue technology stack, into what's happening in the industry, what's happening, as it relates to the economy. And so I think this conversation is going to be super interesting. Henry, thank you for joining us. It's amazing. Like you're amazing to take the time with us.
Well, thank you, Dave, for that great intro. When we were, it's been 17 years, not 1,000, but 17 oftentimes feels like 1,000. It might as well be 1,000 in this space. Like you think about when we started ZoomInfo and you started inside sales, like it was 2007, and the world has changed so dramatically in those 17 years. And I'm really proud and honored to still be here and still running ZoomInfo and really still learning about how to innovate the next iteration of what go-to-market looks like for sales and marketing and rev ops and sales ops professionals. And so it's an exciting opportunity. There's so much happening. There's been not a single year of those 17 years that things didn't change dramatically. But I would say the pace of change today is much, much faster than it's ever been. And so I'm drinking from a fire hose every day and trying to make sure that our very large R&D and product teams are focused on the right things and building the right things for the future.
And I mean, that's super exciting for this conversation because, as you just kind of alluded, things are changing at an accelerated rate. And as a result, if I'm a sales or marketing leader or a rev ops leader, anybody who's kind of in this go-to-market stack, if you will, like it's super hard because like today's reality is different than a year or 2 years. I mean, it's completely different from pre-COVID versus now. So I think there's going to be a lot of super interesting insights that I think you'll be able to share because you do have a unique perspective. And look, just again, for everyone to understand, Henry is one of the preeminent CEOs in this industry, and it is unusual to have this much time with someone who knows so much about this space. So, dude, let's get in. So, my first question that I want to dig into with you, and I want you to just wander, like just go wherever, like wherever you that kind of catches your interest. But the first one is kind of this macro environment we're in, and so for some people who may not know what I mean by that, over the last 24 months, the economy has really changed, and we went from a place where companies were just trying to grow at all costs. Like, so basically cost was irrelevant. It was all about growth. And in the last 18 months, the whole universe changed. And so from saying grow at all costs, now it's profitability, efficiency, productivity, and growth is now second to that. And as a result, we've seen thousands of layoffs over the last 12, 18 months, like hundreds of thousands, just a crazy amount. And we're still seeing it this year. So look, first, just from the broad picture, give me your take on what's going on in this macro environment, in the what's happening in the big picture.
Yeah, let me start like small and then see if I can zoom out on it. So 2021 into 2022, nobody was really focused on, particularly in software, we're really focused on unit economics or profitability. The number one question I would get asked by my investors and public company investors was, can you take down your margin and your profitability and grow faster. That's all anybody wanted to talk to me about. So I was like constantly making excuses for running a profitable business. And in our customer base, our customers were flush with dollars. And I'll give two examples in our customer base, but they're repeated over and over and over and over again. We have a customer, we had a customer, we still have a customer, much smaller, but they had $1 million of ARR. They got raised $50+ million at a $300 million valuation.
Wow.
So 300x multiple on revenue. And they were spending $150,000 a year with us. 15% of revenue on ZoomInfo is just like, listen, I want it. So if you want to,
I'll take it all day long.
I'll take it. But it's just, it doesn't make sense. And when valuations came down to earth and investors said, listen, it's not about growth at all costs, but if I'm going to get a $300 million valuation out of this $1 million ARR business, it actually has to look more like a $50 million business with 20% margins. And right now you're a $1 million business that's burning, I don't know, $10 million a year. And so it's a major paradigm shift in the way that you run your business. And so that's one. And for me, that's a $100,000 a year customer, $150,000 a year customer that is obviously going to go, downsell in a pretty meaningful way, probably to where it should be, like a $15,000, $10,000 a year customer. So that's one example. Another example, if I go to a more scaled company, we have a customer, $75 million of revenue, raised $500 million at a multi-billion-dollar valuation, had 50 sales reps. Over the next 2 years was doubling the size of the sales team. And so bought a 2-year contract with ZoomInfo, went from 50 and bought ahead, right? 150 sales reps. We're going to grow into it. And then they turned the corner on 2022. And the investors showed up and they go, listen, you're a $75 million business. You're growing 50% a year and you're burning $50 million a year to do that. And we're never going to make our money back if that's the kind of business you're running. So we don't want you to grow 50% a year anymore. We want you to grow 10. And we want you to do it with 30% margins. So you're burning $50 million. We actually want you to be making closer to $20 million. And so wipe out the $50 million to spend, add another 20 to it. So figure out how to cut $70 million of cost.
$70 million swing. Yeah.
$70 million.
That's crazy.
And it's crazy. And by the way, we want you to do it in a quarter. And so these guys they're letting go of their sales teams. They're cutting costs anywhere they can. Sales cycles are elongating, like the big tech vendors, CRM, they're stuck in there. They're probably dealing with some downsell in these types of accounts, but they're incredibly sticky. And then everybody around the periphery is paying a pretty big price for the decisions that were made to support a zero interest rate environment to the decisions that are being made in a completely different environment. And so, that is the macro headwind. Now, when that happened, it didn't just limit itself to startups and scale-ups and companies that have received a lot of funding, but the enterprises were doing the same thing, because you saw Meta and Microsoft and Salesforce. Everybody did cuts because during COVID, they stacked up their teams, and then they realized outside of COVID that it wasn't going to run that way anymore. When there weren't trillions of dollars being flooded in the economy, you had to run your business a little bit differently. So then in the enterprise, you also felt this pressure. So you weren't immune really anywhere in your businesses. And we weren't immune in our business either. And so over 23, the business decelerated mainly because our customers weren't getting rid of ZoomInfo, but they were downselling to a place that made more sense. And so gross churn stayed relatively the same, but our net dollar retention was what was impacted the most because people would cut seats, but they'd remain customers of ZoomInfo.
So let's unpack. I mean, what you just shared is like it's 24 months of just blood and guts of what's happened. Honestly, like it's been super brutal for everybody. So if I'm a marketer or I'm a seller in this market right now, my life just got super hard
Yes.
because like when interest rates were zero, meaning money was free, people were investing in these companies, whether they're tech startups to manufacturing to healthcare. Like there was just money everywhere. So people were spending like crazy. So like the sellers, like if you're a seller listening to this right now, you just came off of maybe the easiest selling environment you
No
will
pressure.
ever have in your entire life. Now, what just happened, and Henry, dude, thank you. Like it's so on point with the interest rates going from like 0 to 7% in the space of 24 months or whatever that was. It just became super difficult. Not only did it become difficult to sell, it became impossible just to keep your customers.
And Dave, let me make just a fine point on this because sometimes you hear this like zero interest rate stuff and it's finance and your brain just turns off. But when you just think about dollars going into companies, right? I'm an investor and I can go put $50 million into the stock market, into a bunch of software equities, or I could take that $50 million and put it in the bank and I get guaranteed a 5% return on that money.
Yes.
And I'm not guaranteed a 5% return in any sort of public equity. I'm taking a different type of bet. And as an investor, I'm getting money from pension funds and, state governments and all of these different things to invest those dollars. Well, those guys are thinking the same thing. Maybe I'm not going to allocate as much to public equities or private equities as I did before because I have a guaranteed 5% return over here. And so everything kind of clamped down all over the place. And so, the waterfall of changing from a zero interest rate environment to where we are today, and that's kind of how it feels like, hey, why would I invest in a public equity when I know I can get 5% over here guaranteed? And why would I put my money into public equities, hedge funds, long onlys, or private equity firms when I know I can just put my money over here and get 5% interest?
And what that means is no one is buying anything anymore because there really is no money. And so, okay, so that's this Uber framework of what like we're dealing with in the current environment. And I don't know if anyone's kind of spelled it out to marketing and sales leaders like I think you just did. It's brutally difficult. So like getting a new customer is harder than ever. We're keeping your customer is harder than ever, and keeping your customer even in the range of what they were spending with you is crazy difficult. So with that framework, with that depressing overview, but it's reality. What are some of the things that you're seeing companies do? What are you guys doing? Because you guys just came off like an amazing quarter. Like you just came off, and you guys just reported your Q4 results.
Yep.
Yep, and it was fantastic. The market loved it. They rewarded it. So again, I want to really talk to sales and marketing leaders who are sitting here listening to this thing. What are some of the things that are working for your sales organization and for your marketing organization?
Yeah. So I'll say this number one. It is the most difficult software selling environment I think in the history of software selling. Like 2000, I was in high school, so I didn't really know like what that was like. But I'm fairly certain that for most of our careers, the last year and then probably this year too are going to be the hardest software selling environments that we've operated in. Now, that's really tough because as a seller, you're thinking about 20, and as a marketer, you're thinking about 2021, and it doesn't feel like that far away. And your job was just a lot easier. Like you sold more, you made more money. It was probably, it was definitely easier to sell. There was less scrutiny, shorter deal cycles. And so I just think as a profession, we just have to come to grips with that. It's just harder. Like my job is
reality.
meaningfully harder today than it was before. I was making like more like different decisions that were about growth. Now I'm scrutinizing every investment decision. I'm trying to find places where we're wasting dollars. Like that's happening everywhere. And on my board, I have 3 private equity folks on my board, and they're telling me like there's not a single company in our portfolio that we're not coming in and saying like, hey, you better cut spending across all of your vendors. And that's interesting because what we actually see is from a new business perspective, we've stayed relatively like strong from a new business perspective. So getting the next logo has been meaningfully easier than managing through contraction and downsell in the customer base. I think that has to do with two big things. One, our customers overbought, and I think everybody's customers kind of overbought. Yeah. And so you're dealing with like the shrinking, coming back to reality there. And then, and then on top of that, when you go to a marketer or a salesperson and you say, or a sales leader, and you say, hey, I need you to cut your spend, they're going to their existing vendors to do that. And then a new vendor still has the opportunity to show up and say, like, you want to drive efficiency, you want to drive growth in your business, I can help.
That's interesting.
Versus I've got this vendor who's doing work for me, but it's not driving as much efficiency or effectiveness as I need. And so I'm gonna clamp down on everything in my customer base.
That's super interesting. Let me just, because you just said something that's a little provocative, and I want to challenge you, but I think you're right. But I'm going to challenge you anyway.
Yeah.
So historically, it's always better to save your current customer. It's always more cost effective to keep your current customer than it is to get a new one. And what you're telling me is it's actually not necessarily the case, because customers are always looking for like the next way to win. And it sounds like buyers are giving up on that just a little bit.
Yeah. So I will tell you two things. One, it is still like far more efficient to keep a customer than it is to get a new customer.
Okay. All right.
But that efficiency, like the gap is shrinking. Still like there's a meaningful gap, but the gap is shrinking.
Okay.
And then what I would tell you is that to the point that we just made around like, it's a tough software selling environment, probably the most tough software selling environment you've ever sold in. What percentage of reps do you think are showing up every day, like spelling out the ROI story of the software and solutions that they're selling their customers, and giving their buyers a roadmap to how to talk about the value that they're generating, the ROI that they're delivering, how it's impacting their teams? They don't know how to do that because they just haven't had to do that for the last 5 years. They've been able to show up with kind of a thin layer of value to point to. And things were so good that the customers were renewing at with a very different level of scrutiny than they are today. And that's what you heard every software company say in the middle of 2022 and the back half of 2022 is, scrutiny, sales cycles elongated, scrutiny.
Yeah.
And, what does that really mean? It means like all of a sudden buyers are asking harder questions of their vendors and partners, and they're demanding that you show up with an ROI story, ideally mapped to like a number from a revenue perspective, from a cost reduction perspective. Certainly there was a lot of talk about consolidation early on when the cycle turned, because people believed that you'd see companies consolidating to save on costs. And so that scrutiny, I think, has met sellers flat-footed. And marketers are like also scrambling, like, how do I give collateral to my team so they can talk about ROI, and you're going to show up to a CFO's desk most likely with your solution. And maybe that CFO wasn't involved at all before. The thing got signed in the business unit. And guess what the CFO is going to ask you? Tell me the ROI, tell me the metrics you used, what deals did you help me sell? What efficiencies did you drive? And I want hard numbers. And we just were not in a place where we were sophisticated enough to do that. Maybe the very best of us were, but when you show up to a renewal conversation, you don't have that. It's a very difficult conversation to have.
So you suggested, you saw this in software, but I sit on a board on a healthcare company. I sit on the board of a university, a public university. It's across the board. Like cost savings and cost cutting and return on investment is universally the new requirement. So again, if you're a marketer and a seller or a leader listening right now, your number one takeaway from Henry's presentation is everything you do should be pitching either revenue generation or cost savings. Like hands down, like if you hear nothing else, do that. Just do that.
100%.
So that's amazing. What are some of the other like techniques and tricks that have helped you? Again, you just came off an amazing year, an amazing quarter, and a lot of other companies did not. So, whatever you're willing to share, some of these might be secrets, but what are you willing to share?
I'll tell you the other thing that we at least like, that one of the shifts that we had to make. And our business, like probably, many businesses, you can think it's like a barbell. On one side, I have enterprise. Enterprise grows. It grows, it's sticky, there's lots of white space. And then on the other side, I have our SMB customers. Our SMB customers, like every SMB customer base, churns at a higher rate. You sell them, it's 3 seats, you sell them the 3 seats. There's not a lot of growth to go find. It's not like you're going to go find 500 more seats at IBM. That's not going to happen in your SMB segment. And they go out of business faster. They pivot to, different models. And so for us to be successful and drive a high net retention rate, we have to offset what happens in SMB with a strong enterprise customer base that's growing and mature and sticky. And so we spent a lot of time focused on making sure that we had a lot of product market fit, not just in our SMB clients, but also up in our enterprise business. That's continued to grow and been a success story for us at ZoomInfo. And then as we think about the SMB, what we think a lot about is, one of the great things about ZoomInfo is that it allows SMB companies to compete in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. If every company had to compete on Google Ads, then the biggest companies would always win. And one of the beauties of ZoomInfo is I can be an IT service provider in Boise, Idaho, and compete with the biggest players all around the world because I have direct access with ZoomInfo to key decision makers all across the country. And I hear this over and over and over again from our SMB customers. But the trick is, how do I get every customer to experience in the SMB to experience that same level of upside and opportunity and success? And how do I do that in a way where in a scaled, systematic way where the cost of service doesn't get out of whack.
Prohibitive. Yeah.
And so you're investing in systems. We're investing in systems that drive that. You're investing in really great knowledge centers and universities. Onboarding experiences are tremendously important. Every SaaS business out there can just look at a customer who had a great onboarding experience and a customer who had not a great onboarding experience. And all of that ties back to your retention rates. And so we're spending a lot of time on onboarding, on systems that drive usage. I know, Dave, we're going to talk about AI. But one of
that's where I was going. Yep.
AI is actually simplifying the user experience. And so today with ZoomInfo, if you want to figure something out with ZoomInfo, like you want to know which companies are most likely to buy your products and services, you're on like 7 different screens that you're trying to like triangulate and remember. And then you're kind of manually thinking through, okay, I saw this company was spiking on intent, and this company visited my website, and this is one of my good companies, and it's in the US and in my territory. And that takes a lot of load. And an SMB customer, actually any customer, is going to really struggle to do that. There are 2 in my mind, and there are more, but in my mind, the most crystallized opportunities with generative AI, particularly for software companies, is one on triangulating data points. How do I take multiple data points and triangulate them to understand something? And then 2 on summarizing, large blocks of free form or unstructured text or structured text. How do you summarize that? And so on the first one, instead of you having to go like 7 different places and pull the information out of ZoomInfo, with generative AI, we're able to do that for you. First of all, we know who your company is because the summarization strength, we can just go to your website, read all your case studies, read all your press releases, read all about your company. Now we know who you are, and we can take everything we learned and just apply it to ZoomInfo. And so now we can go and say, these are the companies you should be reaching out to. These are the reasons why. These are the people you should be reaching out to in a prioritized ranked order, which, by the way, for decades, people have been saying that they can do, or we're trying to actually deliver. But without,
and it's never worked. It has never worked, dude.
Never worked.
No.
Never worked.
So let's talk. Okay, I got to unpack some of what you said because there's so many nuggets in here. So one thing, a second lesson is move up market. You will naturally, if you're selling right now or marketing and you're promoting your company, you will naturally have a more difficult time in selling and a more difficult time in retaining and expanding your customers if you're not moving up market. The other thing you said in here, and I love this, is your data. So look, Henry, you're the king of data, right? You've been doing data longer than everybody that I know. Like, and your data is arguably the best that I've ever seen. Like, it's really, really good. Now, if you are selling, you could have the best AI in the world, but if your data is wrong, if you don't know who your ICP is, and how many times have people said, "Oh, well, my CRM data is a mess." Well, okay, guess what? Then if your CRM data is a mess, your AI is going to be off on one side or off on the other side. So you could have an amazing selling process and selling to the wrong people, or you could have the right people and then selling the exact wrong process. And so tell me a little bit more about like the intent data or the signal data that should be feeding AI. Because look, in no uncertain terms, if we're trying to drive efficiency for our customers and they're being forced to do it by their investors, by their board members, by their executive team, and I think AI is the answer to that. You got to get that AI right. And what's behind it all is this data, right? So what's the right data? What data do you like? I know that's a ton. I just threw it at you.
Let's start with just like foundational data. So I've been going around for almost 2 decades telling everybody who would listen, the data in your CRM is terrible and it's causing all sorts of issues for you downstream. Your territories are mapped poorly. Your sales reps are pissed off. They're wasting time with the wrong companies in the wrong areas. There's subsidiary and hierarchy issues. It's just a mess. And that message, while I find it to be incredibly compelling, and we've built a $1 billion+ business on that messaging, if you put me in front of a CRO with that message or a CEO with that message, it was just noise. It's like, what do I care about the quality of data in my CRM system? I don't care. And so
it's a RevOps problem, right? Like, what do I care? It's beneath me.
Not a thing for me. Now,
totally.
One of the things with generative AI that I've been really, happy with is that all of a sudden it's an everybody problem. And why? Go to the C-suite in any meaningful company in the United States and ask them, maybe in the world, and ask them, what are the key initiatives you're working on? And I guarantee you, the CEO is going to say,
across the board,
generative AI. I went to a dinner. JP Morgan did a dinner with Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan. And he started talking about generative AI. And he's like, this is a priority across JP Morgan. Generative AI is really important. And then he's like, and we're looking to use it for, and every major company is doing the same thing. Support, go to market. And when he said go to market, he said outreach to our customers, figuring out who the best customers to reach out to. This is the CEO of the largest bank. I think one of the largest banks, or the largest bank
in the world.
And
definitely in the US. Definitely in the US.
And when he says generative AI, the first 2 things he says are support and outreach to customers. And so that is happening everywhere. Now, what happens when the CEO believes that? He goes and takes it to the CRO and he goes, where's my generative AI projects inside of go-to-market? And then CRO goes, hey, RevOps and everybody else, let's run a generative AI project. And where do you go for that data? You go to your CRM, you pull this data out and you go, tell me who the best customers are. Tell me the people I should be reaching out to at those customers. And it's going to do a terrible job of that because it's bad. It's not.
That's
ever met in 17 years has told me the data in my CRM is great. Like that's never happened.
I'm yet to hear that. No, I'm yet to hear that. And the problem is if your ICP, so it's your ideal customer profile. I mean, I assume most people know that, but if your ideal customer profile, if you think it's this, generative AI and AI in general is able to go into your CRM and extract and say, it's a lookalike algorithm. here's who your customers are. So, and these are the ones who buy lots from you. They expand, they're renewing. Therefore, sell to more companies like this. The problem is, if your data is wrong, what if your employee count's incorrect in your CRM? What if you have duplicates that mean something different? Then you're selling to the wrong people.
Yep, it'll tell
it's across the board. It's all over the place.
Hey, I'm looking for companies that have over 1,000 employees in healthcare, and it goes and grabs, Ford. That's a bad
problem.
thing. All that is
kind of a problem.
Field. And think about like how you let data get in your CRM. There's almost no limiter on it. Sales rep can put it in, marketing can go buy a list, marketing can go to a conference, it's just a mess. And so we cannot rely on that data first and foremost to drive the AI efficiencies that we're looking for. And it is infrastructural. The data that you use to go to market is infrastructure. That is infrastructure. It's how all of us in go to market should be thinking about data on our customers and prospects, is that it is infrastructure for everything else we do. Forecasting, territory planning, and when we finally get to a generative AI. But that is an infrastructural element of the work that we do, the same way the cloud is infrastructure for our systems, the same way that ERP and CRM is infrastructure for our customer data. This is infrastructure for how we go to market. And until we really click on that,
fix that,
the output's really great.
So I want to understand two things. How is it that you guys are helping companies? And it's not that, you guys are the only people who can help solve this, but you're definitely one of them. Let's be honest, you've done this. And the second thing is, I want to know a little bit about your Copilot product, because I want to understand a little bit more about, again, it's not that, you're pitching us, but I want you to explain different ways people are beginning to use both AI and generative AI to solve some of these kind of problems. Sure. So first, how is it that Zoom helps you? By the way, I'm going to use this again. If you haven't heard, if you haven't used this, I'm going to steal this from you, except that now it's public, so everyone's going to know it was your idea anyway. But it is infrastructure. Data is your company's infrastructure, and if that's wrong, you're building on a bad foundation. So I am going to use your analogy.
You also mentioned
unabashedly.
You can steal it. I think I stole it from somebody. You mentioned signals too, like intent data, signals that tell you. I think about data, particularly go-to-market data, in two ways. There's foundational data, right? Company information, contact information. And there's a lot in there, right? Like company information includes industry, size, location, SIC code, NAICS code, description of the company, hierarchy. Are they a subsidiary of someone? Are they a parent of somebody? Technology stack data. So that's all you can think of it as generally not static, but not changing every minute of every day. And then above that contact data, right? What is my title? What is my phone number? What's my mobile, my email address? How do you connect with me? Where do I sit in an organization? And then I think about above that, signal data. And signal data is data that tells you how to prioritize all of the companies and all of the contacts that are in your ICP. You craft your ICP with that foundational data, you prioritize it with signal data. There's all sorts of stuff that tells you only 5% of companies are in market for a product or service at a given time, or maybe it's a little bit more than that, but very limited amount of companies are in market right now for your products and services. And you want to make sure that if they are, you're in front of them. And there are all sorts of digital signal that can tell you when a company is in market for your products and services. The most commonly accepted definition of intent data is data that tells you what a company is researching in the public web. And so is a company researching I don't know, log security or network security or cloud security, or are they researching HVAC maintenance in a way that is outside of the historical bounds that they usually research? So at ZoomInfo, obviously in any given week, we're going to research a set amount of stuff about, Datadog or cloud security or whatever it is.
Right.
When you see the amount of research at ZoomInfo move 2 standard deviations above what the norm is, that is an interesting flag to move that company up the priority list to get in contact with. That's, one type of intent. Another type of intent is a company visits your website and doesn't fill out a form. Maybe they fill out a form. That's a really high level of intent, right? They came to your website, they read stuff, and then they labored through filling out a form to identify themselves to you. That's the highest level of intent. Whatever you're doing, stop everything, call that person.
Call them.
Call them right now. And so if you go to ZoomInfo, fill out a form on our website, we will call you back within 90 seconds. And there's all sorts of system and process we've built over the years to make sure that's the case. And we're processing thousands of those every day. So that's the number one type of intent. What if I just come to your website and I don't tell you who I am? By the way, this is 98% of your website traffic is showing up and not identifying themselves. And most of us have no visibility into who those people were, why they were on our website, do they fit our ICP or not. And so we believe anonymous website identification is a super, and I know you guys do too at Get Signals, believe that to be an incredibly valuable piece of data to be able to say, okay, they didn't fill out a form, but they did visit the pricing page and they did look around here and there, and then run a motion behind that. Your champion, someone bought your product somewhere else. Guess what? People don't stay at companies forever. They're going to leave that company. And when they leave, that's an incredible signal to call them at their new company and make sure you're top of mind for them. By the way, it's also a great signal and a threat in the existing, there's a threat and an opportunity. There's opportunity.
That's right. Yep.
There's a threat in your existing account. So champion tracking. But champions don't have to move for there to be an opportunity. If I sell to the CIO and a new CIO comes in, or a new member of my buying committee comes in, those are all key moments for me to reach out. And on and on and on. They got funding. They opened a new location. They had a good quarter. They mentioned something in an earnings call. Their job description says that they're hiring 3 people to do something that your product addresses. They add technology, remove a technology. We believe that all of these signals are the key to making sure you're in front of the right people at the right time. I said not a lot changed in the last 17 years, but one of the biggest things that changed is there is now this incredible amount of digital signal available that tells you a lot about what a company is doing and what they're thinking. And there is now technology not only to store it, but generative AI technology that can make sense of it for you.
Can interpret it
in a usable way.
So here, you've just said so much amazing stuff. So here's the problem. Again, buyers today versus 17 years ago are communicating almost overly verbosely, but it's digital, right? What they're not doing today is like raising their hand, getting the phone and saying, hey, I'd like some information on this. But they're on your website. They're looking at your pricing. They're looking at your competitors. Like there's all kinds of information. The problem is sellers and marketers aren't listening that way, or they are to one piece. So there's so much signal data out there. There's so much data that it becomes impossible for one seller or one marketer to be able to capture all of that across, a target list of 100 accounts or 1,000 accounts. It's impounts, right?
Yes.
So tell me.
It's a great segue to Copilot, because what we built ZoomInfo Copilot around is this problem. And it's self-serving in a lot of ways, because our biggest issue with customers is, intent, I didn't know you had that. Oh, websites, I didn't know you had that. Oh, champion tracking, I didn't know you had that. I didn't know you had my buyers. I didn't know you had all of this signal. And so what we've done with Copilot is we've transitioned what was for 17 years a pull model to a push model. We plug into your CRM, we plug into your website, we know who's visiting your website, we know what your website says, we know who you are, we know who you've won, we know who you've lost. We have AI models that go build out what your ideal customer profile looks like. We know who your target accounts are as a seller, and we know what the branch outside of those target accounts looks like. And so when you sit down every day, we're going to deliver you the prioritized list of accounts you should be engaging with, the reasons why, intent, website, champion move, funding, said something about a problem that you solved in an earnings call or a podcast or an interview or a press release or a job description. We've been accumulating all of these really interesting data pieces that we make available on our platform, but then you have to be like a super power user to pull the search together. And with by leveraging AI today, we can just push that to you in a really powerful way. And then we can tell you, by the way, here's the email message, which is the easiest part, but it's the whiz-bangiest part too. So here's the email that's written for you. It's taken the context and the signal, and it's written you a really great email. Just hit email.
That's amazing. Okay. So, honestly, it feels like this kind of solution. What you described, anyone who's listening, if they're not falling all over themselves saying, oh my gosh, I need something like that, then maybe rethink your job. Rethink what you're doing right now.
I'm going to have to fire all of my product managers and rethink the way I think about the markets.
Okay, it's we'll have those two possibilities. We have those two possibilities. No, and again, the problem is there's so much communication happening that's digital. We just finished a study that shows depending on your industry, there are 18 to 50 different digital signals that your buyers or your prospects are actually communicating. And my guess is you're listening to maybe 2 or 3 at best if you're a seller or you're a marketer. So this is the way to respond to this drive for efficiency, this drive of productivity. And so if you're not using some variation of this, I think you're going to find yourself outmoded. I think you're going to find yourself and again, is it your solution? Look, we know that works. We know it's a really great solution, but there's a lot out there, and depending on your size and scale, there's different levels of complexity, but you have to get engaged look, if you haven't done this, go through a demo. Again, I know this has not been choreographed, but go do a demo of ZoomInfo's Copilot. Go see what it is.
I'd love to show it to you. Also, look, that whole thing might sound really intimidating. And so what I would tell you is if you want to just dip your toe in the water, then the way to think about this is around go-to-market plays. And we think about go-to-market plays. And so go to your best seller. They're doing some variation of this today. And just ask them, what are you tracking? If I go to my best sellers today, well, if I went to them 6 months ago, because I had to close a loophole. But if I went to them 6 months ago and I went, hey, what are you doing that is putting you in the lead? They will tell me, the top seller told me.
Oh yeah, they know.
Everybody else, and I go to our website's page that shows you all of the anonymous visitors that have come to ZoomInfo, but they've identified them. And I just cross-reference to make sure they're not customers, and I put those in my name, and I start calling against them. Great. How do I take that and build an automated, industrialized play around that? If I go to the same guy, he told me, I read job descriptions every day. I look for open job positions, and then I look for open job positions that say cold calling or new logo acquisition. And then I put those at the top of the list, and I start calling the VPs of sales at those companies. Great. Those are now industrialized inside of Copilot.
Yeah.
You don't have to be this super enterprising guy to be able to figure out those
techniques.
Tricks. Yeah, those techniques. And I think that is the power of what you can do when you couple digital signal with AI.
So look, that's if you're on a budget, you can't get your boss to give you any money. The trick here, you just said something's amazing, and I've done the same thing for years, because your best sellers do some variation of this already. Everyone has. In fact, one I heard was they watch LinkedIn competitors, and anytime one of their ICP starts following a competitor, he calls them.
Yeah.
It's obvious, right? In hindsight, but his success rate is really high on that. Yep. So go interview your top 3 sellers and just ask them what their techniques are, and then institutionalize it. Make it into a system or a process that all of your sellers can do. Now, you should use it that's a band-aid.
By the way, Dave, what you just said, that is the future of go-to-market. That is what it is.
Yeah.
Look at what every one of your best sellers are doing. Industrialize that motion. Do it at scale. It runs.
Put it into systems, put it into processes, like however you've got to do it with your budget today. Like that's, if you're trying to get a nugget out of today, like do that. All you have to interview them and then institutionalize it. Like that's it. Okay. So we only have a couple more minutes left. What's coming around the corner? Like you have insight into new technologies, into investments, you have insight into trends, like help us see where it's going to be in a year and in 5 years.
Here's a fun one.
Okay.
What do you think was the fastest growing title in the world last year, according to LinkedIn?
I am going to speculate, and I don't know, but don't make me look dumb if I'm wrong. It's either kind of head of RevOps or head of like go to market.
Wow, good for you. It's head of RevOps. It's RevOps. We didn't choreograph that before.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, it's RevOps. The RevOps title is the fastest growing title in the world right now. And that's super interesting because what I see in my customer meetings today is when I have a meeting with the chief revenue officer, guess who he or she always brings to the call? There's always a RevOps person who comes alongside. And what does that tell you? It tells you that data is becoming the most important part of how a company goes to market. Because what are the RevOps people doing? They're orchestrating data between your sales system, your marketing system, your third-party data, your ABM platform. They're bringing that data together. Ideally, they're centralizing it. They're pushing it back out in an orchestrated motion. Those folks are going to become more and more valuable and more important to how a modern company acquires new customers, grows their existing customers, runs efficiently. They are an unlock into the go-to-market of any company. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I believe today, or maybe the second biggest thing. The first thing, which is enabled by that RevOps profession, is I really do believe that corralling digital signal, your own first-party digital signal, with available third-party digital signal to prioritize and orchestrate your next best motion out to a prospect or a customer. That is where we're all going to live over the next decade.
No question. So that's amazing, right? So basically what you're saying is you need to bring this person on your team. Like you need someone who can span the different departments. So where do they report into, by the way? Where does head of RevOps? Is that into the CRO, the CMO, into the CEO? Like where do they report into?
Differently. But mostly I see it reporting into the CRO. Okay. Mostly I see it in the CRO. And what ends up happening with this role is that it takes sales ops, it takes marketing ops, and it takes some like BI. And it puts it all into one centralized place.
That makes sense. Yep.
Obviously super important in the way that we're all thinking about how we continue to grow our businesses efficiently.
Well, as you described data as your infrastructure, and your head of RevOps owns that infrastructure. So if we kind of let's bookend this. You started by saying data is infrastructure and you need a head of RevOps. Even if it's not like the most senior person in the world, you need someone who's sorting through all of your data, cleaning it up, using tools like ZoomInfo to try and like create a single source of truth, and then consolidating all of your signals to interpret who you should be talking to, prioritizing which companies you should be engaging with. This is amazing. Like this is like truly like, I don't know that people realize how much insight, like I'm sure they do. They're smarter than me.
At least you do, Dave. And that's all.
No, I'm excited by it. That's all. Then we're good. No, dude, this is so valuable as a marketer, because these things are, and look, we have individual contributors on this event all the way up to CEOs and CMOs. But I think there's stuff to be learned that you've shared that can be applied to everybody. So like this has been like
And
super
Dave,
valuable.
before we go, when we started, you said that there was one other question I haven't touched on at all, which is post-COVID. What is the world like post-COVID?
I know.
I'll take 1 minute to say.
Do it. If you have the time, I'll take it for sure.
I am on the road meeting customers every single week, and I'm in their offices, and partners are in their offices. And so I don't, from meeting your customers and meeting your partners, you are at a disadvantage if you are not on the road meeting your customers and meeting your partners and being a great partner to them in person. Makes a huge difference. And so if your competition is out there doing it and you're not, you are behind.
You're in trouble.
That's when dominoes fall around this thing, is that we can all say that flexible work from home and all of this stuff is the most important thing and it's the new wave. But the minute your competitor is out there meeting your clients and shaking their hands and trying to solve their problems in person, you're going to be out there too, unless you want to lose.
So
go ahead.
The COVID, hey, we work from home. We don't do this in person. That's kind of done. Like, we can still work from home, but we better be belly to belly, meeting with customers, meeting with prospects.
100%. You got to be out there meeting with. And I will tell you, look, there are some things, and like, it's blasphemy because I never went out there and told my teams we were going to be remote first and remote forever. It's a little bit
that is blasphemy
for me to tell you this, but there are some things that I actually am more productive doing either from home or some other place. So like a coffee shop, a library, there are things that, once a week I can get more out of myself when I'm somewhere else. And I'm okay with that. Listen, once a week, twice a week, you want to change it up to drive productivity and creativity. Great. But the rest of the time we should be in an office together, collaborating with one another, learning from one another. And we absolutely should be out there meeting our customers.
So Henry's last point, people buy from people. They don't buy from screens, right? They buy from people, and they buy through relationships and friendships and trust.
Yep. Yeah,
It's amazing.
We met a decade ago, maybe more.
I
still remember where we were. We were in Minneapolis at an AAISP conference. And 100%. We've had a close relationship ever since that meeting. And would we have as close of a relationship if we never met in person? I don't think so. Wouldn't be
no way. No, you can't. You can get to know people, but like that bond happens. There's something about the kind of the human animal that when we're talking in person, like we went to lunch, you spoke at Silicon Slopes, and we went to a lunch, and it's just like you connect with people when you're with them. So
different way. Yep.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, it's different.
So go do that with your customers, and go do that with Do that. Yeah.
It's amazing. Henry, you're the best. You're amazing. Thank you for everything you've shared. Thank you for your leadership in the space. And I'd say everyone, go forth, execute. Let's run the play.
Run the play. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.